Hello, and thank you for joining the Caneberry Educational Conference as part of the 2021 Virtual Southeast Regional Fruit and Vegetable Conference. I am Gina Fernandez. I'm a professor at NC State University and will be the moderator and presenter for this session. I'd like to thank Wish Farms for sponsoring this 2021 Caneberry Educational Conference. Pesticide CEU and CCA credits are available for most presentations offered during the live SE Regional Conference. Check the Pesticide CEU guide for a list of approved presentations and participating states. The Pesticide CEU guide is located in the Events Resources tab under the Media Player. The guide is also available at the Resources Center located in the main menu of the conference platform. Please note, pesticide credits will only be available for those for number one, registered attendees only, and number two, only during the live conference. Credits will not be available for on-demand viewing. There's a simple three-step process to receive CEU and CCA credits. First, go to the audience chat box located on the left side of your screen. Type your first name, last name, and states for which you are requesting credits. Again, go to the audience chat box located on the left side of your screen and type your first, last, and name and state for which you are requesting credits. You will need to do this for every presentation for your CEU credits. The second step is to sign out at the end of every presentation. Again, sign your first name, last name, and the states for which you are requesting credits. You will be reminded to sign out at the end of the presentation. A third step is to complete the pesticide CEU registration. You only have to complete this registration one time during the conference. This is not required for every single presentation. To access the pesticide CEU registration web link, open the pesticide CEU guide on the Events Resources tab located under the Media Player. The pesticide CEU registration web link is located on the front cover of the guide. This presentation is pre-recorded in December here to reduce technical difficulties. We will be answering your questions, however, live at the end of this presentation, so we'll come back in January. You can submit a question at any point during the presentation by typing your questions in the questions box and pressing send. Don't forget to thank the the conference sponsors and exhibitors by visiting the virtual trade show and feature products pavilion. All right, so now we'll start with the presentations. So once again, I am Gina Fernandez. I am the Blackberry, Raspberry, Strawberry breeder at NC State University and also extension specialist. Today I'm going to be talking about Blackberry and pruning strategies because you're never too old to learn something new and there's always room to tweak how you prune and train your blackberries. So just a few basics first before we begin. The blackberry, there are two fruiting types. There are floor cane fruiting types. They produce fruit on the second year growth. They flower in the spring. They fruit in early summer. And there's regular pruning is required in the fall and winter along with the summer tipping. These are the primary varieties grown in the hot summer heat is an issue. These are the Ouachita, Navajo, and other of the floor cane fruiting types. The primate cane fruiting types, the newer types, they produce fruit on the first year canes. They flower in the midsummer and they fruit in early fall. And they can be managed with minimal fall pruning and they must be tipped in late spring. Due to time constraints, we're not going to be talking about primate cane training and pruning. We're just going to focus on floor cane fruiting and training at this time. Okay, once again, just to look at those fruiting types, floor canes, they fruit on the laterals produced on 2-year-old canes in early summer. So there are these canes right here. They have a different look. The canes are darker and the fruit and flowers are produced on those canes. The primate canes, they fruit on the ends of the new canes in late summer and fall. And usually a good way to tell the difference between these two is the floor canes have 3 leaflets and the primate canes, at the beginning at least of fruiting, will have 5 leaflets. Just kind of a review, just so everybody is on the same page here, the major parts of a blackberry trellis, and this is a very simplified version of it. You have an end or anchor post, usually is larger than your line posts right here. The line posts can be 20 to 35 25 to 35 feet apart. Use somewhere between a 9 and 12 gauge high tensile wire for the wires. Usually just use 2 wires per trellis on each side. So this is just one side of the trellis. And line posts should be wood or metal. Often have really good luck with T-posts. Wood treated stands up better to wind stress better. So especially at the end, might be better to have a wood post. Tools, there are all sorts of tools out there, but a really good tool, as any person who uses tools knows, is important. These are just a few of the different pruners and loppers that I actually surveyed my fellow tree and grape specialist. We like Felco and Vesco type pruners. These are not necessarily endorsements, just ones that work well for us. The loppers, again, Felco, Vesco, and Hickok loppers. And the thing to do every year, especially this time of year, is to sharpen and clean them. All these type of pruners, you have replaceable parts and can be cleaned and sharpened. So good YouTube examples out there, just go and check those out. All right, before we start going over the pruning and training itself, you want to know, why do you prune and train? So there's certain objectives. You want to remove the dead and diseased canes. You want to open up that canopy. You want to increase the size of the fruit and also the yield of the fruit. You want to do this usually in January to February before the buds swell. You can start as early as December, depending on where you are and what your labor situation is. And you also want to have that fruit evenly distributed from the top of the canopy to the ground. And this is something that we're going to emphasize in this particular talk, that you really want to have that even distribution of fruit. All right, so this is the Lineberger Guzman Blackberry pruning and training method. Over the years, I had visited Ervin Lineberger and worked with him in his blackberry fields, and noticed something that consistently happens in his field. He has a full canopy of fruit every year, and he accredits it to his field supervisor, Daniel Guzman, for developing this training method. And we'll go over that. It's a modified V trellis system with the type of pruning method that we talk about all the time, with just one little tweak. All right, so this is what you want here on the right side, is you want fruit evenly distributed. You can see it's ripening on the top first, but you have fruit all the way down to the ground. This is what you don't want to have, and hope it shows up better at your screen than it does right here on my tiny little one, is fruit at the top of the canopy. You can see all this ripe green fruit right at the top of the canopy, and not a lot of fruit down here. And I see this occasionally on some in some fields, where this whole area right here could have a whole lot more production if it was trained in the right way, rather than having it crowded at the top here. You can see how you can have the fruit developing early here versus a little bit later down here as well too. So it's a nice flow of that fruiting season. All right. So why do you do, first of all, we're going to start with winter pruning, because that's the season we're in right now. You want to remove those dead canes as close to the ground as possible. You don't have to get them exactly on the ground, and then toss them into the road. Just get them out of the way. You don't want to keep them underneath that canopy. Remove the diseased and insect-infested canes. Small canes are those going in the wrong direction. So those are pretty easily noticed if they have gulls on them, if they have diseases on them, or if they're just too skinny to support a crop. Get them out of the way. Leave about 3 to 7 canes, depending on the cane density that you start with and what your canopy looks like. You don't want it too dense. You don't want too much shade, because it increases disease and insect problems. So you want to have to open up that canopy. Hard to cut back sometimes, but that's what you want to do. And then you want to prune back the laterals in 12 to 18 inches, and we'll have a few diagrams of that in a second here. And you want to secure to the wire about half on one side of the trellis and half on the other side of the trellis. So if you have that V trellis, that's what you want to do. And along the horizontal rows. So this is the key point right here. And then you want to remove those prune canes from the row after you're done pruning in the winter. So here's an example of what winter pruning will look like. This is a before example right here. So you want to select the 3 to 7 healthy canes right there, of the floor canes. You want to prune the tops about 45 to 50 inches, so right at the top of that top wire. And those laterals you want to prune to about 12 to 18 inches. So you can see an example of before and after. And this is these laterals, those side branches, they can go on and on. You want to prune them to about 12 to 18 inches, as they're not as fruitful as you get further on out. Okay, the next step, when you start to train those laterals or those canes, so you have, this is an example on one side of the canopy, you have 4 canes. So this is 3 to 7. So this is about half of the canes that you have on this side of the canopy. You want to do this. You want to tie half of those to the top wire or wrap them around to the top wire and half to the bottom wire there. So you can see on both sides of that, you want to fill in those fruiting corridors. You don't want to do this. You don't want to tie everything to that top wire because you're just going to get crowding at this top wire. So this is the important differentiation. And we haven't really mentioned this in the past. So this is something that a bit of a tweak to really increase your fruiting potential there. So this would be an example of very schematic example of what that would look like on one side of the canopy. So you have the main canes with the fruiting laterals. And if they're long enough, you can go ahead and just wrap them around the canes, or you can tie them as well if they need extra support. But oftentimes there's enough that you just have to wrap them and you don't have to worry about tying them. So this will allow for 4 fruiting corridors. So this is the V trellis right here, and you can have the fruiting corridor on the top 2 wires and also the bottom 2 wires in this simple V trellis system. So this is what it will look like if you, this is actually, Ervin sent me these slides from earlier this week, I guess. We can see that looking down at the end of the row, some of the canes are wrapped around the top here, and some of them are wrapped around the bottom row as well. So he's not even using ties there. Here's another example from the side. You can see that they're wrapped down here and they're wrapped up here as well. So then you have this fruiting corridors, 1, 2, 3, 4 of fruit going down either side of the row. So those fruiting canes and spurs are trained along those horizontal wires, and there'll be gaps. You can see those big gaps in between, so you can actually see through that trellis system in the early springs. And those buds are spaced out evenly to intercept air and sunlight without being shaded. So you have plenty of sun exposure here and here, rather than everything up here on the top and not getting enough sun down here. So you really do open that up, and that's the key to his success. Here's an example again. You can see that this top corridor here and the lower corridor here, they're starting to flower in fruit, and they're starting to fill in that canopy. So by the time it really starts to fruit, you will have a full canopy. So this was what it will look like when you're actually done fruiting. You can have that fruit again from the top to the bottom of the canopy. All right, so then we'll move on to the summer, where you have to also maintain the canopy. And this in the summer, what we do is called tipping. And what it does is forces laterals to branch. And this is a tipping of the primicanes. It maintains the height within the picking area. You can be pruned and tipped until late summer. We want a minimum of 1 time. More is better, depending on how vigorous your growth is in your particular field. And it must always be followed by a fungicide spray. And what I would ask the audience at this point is why. I'll answer my own question because of cane blight disease and other diseases as well. So you want to make sure that you get that fungicide in over that pruning, because you have that wound, and that is a space for infection for that cane blight and other diseases, as we're finding out lots of potentially other diseases as well for that in that open wound. So this is what the primicanes would look like before tipping, and some of these may even have to be pruned with the pruners because they are so big, but this is what it looks like. So you can see all the fruit down here, and these are the primicanes before tipping. All right, so this is what a tipping looks like in the summer. You have the soft tipping, where you can actually just do with your fingers, and this is the preferred method. This is before, and this is after. You can see that's a nice narrow diameter there. You want to tip them when they get to be about 45 to 50 inches high, just above that top wire, because that's, if you think about it, that's where you want your fruit to be available for your pickers to harvest, because you don't want it too tall, because you're just not able to reach that height. So you want to have them tipped at that point, and then they'll start to put out lateral branches. And then you also need to remove the floricanes after fruiting. So this is always occurring, and it's always a busy, busy time. So the tipping will probably start before your fruit is all harvested, but by the time you're done, the end of the summer, you will start to have to remove those floricanes. So those are the canes that produced other fruit, and you do need to remove those as well in the summer. So that's an example of where you tip right there with those little arrows. And this is what it would look like later on. All right. So as I mentioned before, the summer pruning, you want to remove those spent or dead, basically dying floricanes after they are fruiting and get them out of the way so you can, again, open up that canopy, get the sun onto those leaves so they can produce their photosynthesis and also increase the air circulation within that canopy to stop disease spread. So I just want to thank these two gentlemen right here. This is Ervin Lineberger and Daniel Guzman. Ervin Lineberger, as everybody knows, he's one of the grandfathers of the Blackberry industry, Kildeer Farms in Kings Mountain, North Carolina. I think he's been in business about 39 years. And Daniel Cortez Guzman is also worked with him for many, many of those years, and over time has developed that system. So I'm calling it the Lineberger Guzman system. And that's the one where you fill those 4 corridors with the floricanes. All right. So now I'm going to move on to the second presentation. And this is a presentation developed by Amanda McWhirter. She is a assistant professor at the University of Arkansas. We'll take questions at the end of both of these presentations with the live moderators. I just want to present her quick overview of the RCA trellis, and mostly what she wanted to talk about was the amount of time and the efficiency of this system, so you can start to learn a little bit more about it. All right, so the RCA trellis, rotating cross-arm trellis. Amanda McWhirter developed these slides and worked with me and sent them on to me. Amanda and I have worked for many years together on slides, so we often share slides. So here we go. So the rotating cross-arm trellis, if for those of you who are not familiar with it, is the fruit is produced. It's an entirely different trellis system than what you'd use in Blackberries, just the V trellis. The fruit is produced on one side of the canopy. We found that it reduces sunscald and heat load on that canopy, and it protects the canes from winter injury. And there are a lot of growers have picked this up in the Midwest because they can grow blackberries through the winter by covering them with row covers. And it also reduces harvest labor. I'm going to talk a little bit about those numbers here in a second. So this is what the rotating cross-arm trellis looks like in the field in the springtime. This was originally developed by Fumi Takeda, and actually Herb Stiles had another version of this as well from Virginia Tech. So this is production. This is an example of the trellises laying down in the springtime with the cross arms at almost a horizontal position. And you can see the sun there going in the background. And what that does is the sun, the plants want to produce flowers and in response to the sun. So all this canopy right here, all the flowers and fruit will be developed on this side of the canopy. They want to grow towards the sun. And then when you flip up that canopy, there'll be very few flowers on the other side of the canopy because they always want to grow towards the sun. A basic principle of plant growth. This is what it looks like later on in the spring. So you can see all those flowers right there. Then you tip it over, and then this is the harvest side of the canopy. And there's very few fruit on this side of the canopy. That's where the fruit are. Usually rows are oriented east-west, and then the fruit is facing north, or sometimes it can be facing west too. Is what you want to do is reduce that heat load on those fruits so they stay cooler through the season or through the day. Because if the sun rises on one side of the canopy, that fruit doesn't get hot until later on in the day, so it doesn't stay hot all day. Okay, so all berries are on one side. Berries and pickers are on that side, so they're also in the mornings or whenever they pick too, so they don't have to look into the sun, and they're shaded, and you get less sun scald. So it's just a really nice system to improve berry quality. You can see how that moves back and forth. You can cover the canes in the winter too in the northern climates to produce or to protect from cold injury. And we've actually done this in North Carolina as well. We have a very small, short row of these, and it does work to help protect those canes, make it through some of those, especially in the springtime when you have those killing frost on those buds. It's a little bit difficult, but it works. So this is what it would look like through the seasons. This is what it looks like in the fall. There's the canes, just the prima canes after harvest. They're just kind of up there. All the canes these are all prima canes. They'll be soon floor canes in the winter. This is what it looks like in the winter. You lay it down, especially in the northern climates. So if you need to put that row cover on, you can put it on and it can be protected. In the springtime, you want to flip it or leave it in that position, depending on which way you started there. So you have all the flowers growing up towards the sun. And in the summer, you flip it back over. So you have all the fruit. This is early summer, and this is when it's fruiting. So you have the fruit all on one side. And basically, you want to have about 5 feet between each of the plants, and so that fills up that row. I believe this is a first-year planting, so it's not quite filled in, but after this first year, these gaps will be completely filled in. You can train canes so you have no gaps in that canopy. Okay, so here's some of the information that she wanted to share with you about the labor and economics of it. Don't have dollars assigned to this yet, but just want to go over some of the numbers. So they had a crew, and they timed how long it would take them to do these various tasks through the season. All right, so for the rotating cross-arm trellis, they recorded a number of minutes for cane training, for the maintenance, the irrigation, spraying, etc., for harvest itself, and then for frost protection. So the minutes that were recorded total for the RCA trellis, the cane training takes a lot of time. So it's about 7,428, or about 2,751 per 100 linear feet. So that's about 2,000, almost 3,000 minutes for 100 linear feet. For maintenance, about 435 minutes per 100 linear feet. Harvest is about 1,600 minutes per 100 linear feet. And then frost protection, 433. So a total is about 14,000 minutes for their whole trial. But if you go down to linear feet too, it's about 5,263 minutes, or total hours of 88 hours for the RC trellis. Look at those same parameters for the T trellis or V trellis, basically the same type of trellis system that we just explained in the previous talk. And the number of minutes total and per 100 linear feet is about 1,400 minutes for cane training, 861 minutes for maintenance, 2,591 minutes for harvest, for a total of 4,863 minutes for the T trellis, or 81 minutes total, or 81 hours total for this trellis versus this trellis. So the difference here for the cane training, really high in the RCA trellis, but lower amount of time needed to harvest that fruit because it's all in one plane, basically. You don't have to reach into that canopy to grab the fruit. The T trellis, on the other hand, T or V trellis doesn't need as much work training and pruning those canes, especially in the summer. But when it comes time for harvest, a lot more time to harvest that fruit. So those are the difference between the RCA and the T trellis. And I think they're working with an economist to try to put some numbers to those figures, but you can kind of get an idea. Maybe 7 hours difference between these two for 100 linear feet. Is that worth it to you? That's to be determined. All right. And there's the summary there. So yes, they are doing an economic analysis, is ongoing to determine if increased yields can make up for the higher training costs. Stay tuned. Maybe next year we'll hear more about this one. All right, that's the end of the talk here. I just want to make a couple of reminders here. There's daily networking opportunities for you at this conference. the morning coffee chats beginning at 8:15 a.m. and the evening receptions and networking begin at 5 p.m. And I'm sure some of us will be there for you to chat with if you want to talk with us more informally as well. So are there any questions from anybody? Now we'll flip over to the moderators. Double check on that one. Yep, that's all we have for you right now. I want to thank Amanda for sending me these slides and for your time and expertise. To all attendees, thank you for attending these presentations. Don't forget to sign out for your pesticide credits in the audience chat. And all educational presentations and the virtual trade show will be available for you to access until April 30th, 2021. So come back if you missed a presentation or just want to rewatch one and learn how to do those pruning and training tricks, or if you need to search for a service or product provided in the virtual trade show. Again, thank you for the presentation. This concludes the presentation, and thank you all for attending. This is a strange year, but so glad to touch base with you all one way or the other. Hopefully next year we'll see you all in Savannah. All right. And if you want to ask questions, you can go to that chat box now. Thank you.